This is Abe Freetanzer from CinemaDailyUS.com, and I'm thrilled to be speaking with Barry Levinson and Ben Foster about their terrific new film, The Survivor. How are you both doing today?
Okay.
Doing well. How are you, Abe?
I'm good. Thank you so much for making this film. It's really very powerful, and I think it's a story a lot of people don't know, even though there are so many stories about the Holocaust. And I know that you both have your own personal connections to Jewish heritage and the idea of people you knew or knew of being persecuted. Can you share a little bit about that?
I'm sorry, say that again, about people that we knew.
That you have your own connections to your Jewish heritage and stories or memories of people being persecuted in their homelands.
Well, I mean, the only one that I can, I shouldn't say the only one, but the most personal one was when I was a little kid and late 40s. And I lived with my parents and my grandparents. And then this man came to the house, and it turned out to be my grandmother's brother who had come to America. And I didn't know anything about that she ever had a brother. She had never spoken about him, nothing. And they put him upstairs in my bedroom on a cot on the other side of the room. And then the first night I woke up because he was yelling, and he was speaking in a foreign language, and he's thrashing about in bed, and then he'd fall back asleep. And it went on night after night after night. And after about 2 weeks, he moved out and got his own place, and then ultimately moved away. And nothing was ever spoken about him that I ever heard. And when I was around 16, I was sitting with my mother in the kitchen, and we were talking about something. He says, well, that's when Simca, was in the concentration camp. And I went, what? And that was the first time that I knew, and they had never talked about it, and like sort of shielding me from this, but they didn't know that he was waking up night after night with these nightmares. And then it suddenly go, oh, now I understand what that is. He's haunted by something that happened in the past. So when I got the script, and as soon as I was reading it, I was immediately thinking about that incident. It just, first time since, suddenly, boom, there it was. And then I thought, well, the survivor of a trauma like that, Auschwitz, et cetera, concentration camps, then it haunts you. That now we refer to as post-traumatic stress disorder. And I mean, now we give a name to it. Doesn't have to be someone from the camps, and the soldier or whatever. Anyone who's had a really traumatic experience, and it haunts them, and they can't let it go, and it affects how they communicate with people, how they live their lives. And then that was my entrance to this piece.
What about you, Ben?
Well, my Nana came over as a young girl from the Ukraine and smuggled her baby brother in a basket. When they escaped in the 1920s from the pogroms, they would have faced a likely death had they stayed. And because of her parents' courage to leave, they didn't have the papers for her brother, her newborn brother. He was just born while they were waiting for it to get in steerage, to go on the boat to come to Ellis Island. And if this baby was discovered and they were turned back, they understood that they were all going to go back. And that kind of courage is something that Americans, American born, don't often reflect enough about. And particularly what's going on today in the Ukraine is quite stirring. I have kids, so they're tip of the spear, right?
Right. Well, I do think that there's a real importance to this, especially as there are fewer and fewer survivors of the Holocaust living today, to telling the story and making sure this is something that is not forgotten, especially with other things happening in today's world that people might compare and say that we should really never let this happen again. What was the collaboration like with the USC Shoah Foundation in making this film?
a lot. I mean, great resources, the library, access to testimony, details. They were extraordinarily generous with us.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting the idea of shame that Harry feels in sharing his story, and especially with other survivors because of the things that he had to do. How did you relate to that idea of a complicated morality and the need for survival?
You want to take that one, Barry? Or should I?
Well, I mean, I think if you're saying in terms of, guilt, shame, all of those things are what that person takes with them. I mean, that's the thing you can't let go. That's why relationships with sons and daughters are difficult, because they don't want to talk about it. Because on one hand, they believe that they're sort of shielding their kids from the horrors of what happened. On the other hand, by not sharing it, they think they don't know what happened. So then they're just thinking that, maybe dad doesn't like me, maybe because they don't know what the reasonings are for something's wrong in the relationship. And so it has its consequences that moves on to the next, generation. And the idea of the guilt of what took place, of surviving, is difficult. It's, why me? I survived, and I survived because of. So that hangs in the air all the time. And in this, that's part of the journey of Harry Haft, is to finally come out the other end, and so you can finally be free, really free. And so you go, well, if we can do this right, this can be a rather interesting story, just for people in general. It's not just have to be the concentration camp individual. There are so many of us, unfortunately, soldiers or displaced people that are dealing with all kinds of trauma. And so I thought this is a worthwhile subject matter, greater than even the camp itself. So that's one, but look at here and look at here. And what's going to, even like if you apply to the Ukrainians, you got 3 million displaced people. So what happens to them? They're not, their homeland, are they ever going back? What did they see? What were the horrors of it? What is it like? A whole new life. I mean, it's not like whenever that ends or whatever the hell happens. It's not like, oh, okay, now things are all better. There's a lot of baggage to be carried.
Of course. And of course, for you, Ben, there's a real incredible physical transformation here, losing a lot of weight and then gaining a lot of weight. What was that process like for you?
My takeaway from that is it's better to eat. I'm sure of it now. It was what the world needed.
I also appreciate the authenticity of the accents and the fact that you really, I was reading you put a lot of work into sort of transforming the accent gradually as Harry spent more time in America. What was that process like for you? Is that something you had done before?
Well, we took a lot of care working with a Yiddish expert to identify the dialect of Harry from Belchitz of Poland, and as he becomes more Americanized, and that was something that Barry and I would play with, which is just playing with language. How would a non-native English speaker begin to play with English? The job is to be in service of your character, and there's a lot to serve here.
Yeah, and I know that you both worked together actually right at the beginning of your career, Ben. What is it like to collaborate again two decades after that?
It's not to be too mushy or cliche about it, but it's a dream. Barry shaped me. He gave me my first film role, and how he approaches a day, how he approaches a character, how he works with his cast is something that, had I worked with a different director at some point as my first, I don't think, I certainly wouldn't be the way that I am today. So Barry's interest in cutting out the BS and finding something that may not be at once identifiable or even on the page. So that's something that I've taken with me, and had, it was an enormous joy to be on set with Barry again. And even in this dark world, we laughed a lot. Right? It was a fun set.
Yeah, well, I did want to ask about that because I think that there is some humor to be found in this film, especially when Harry tries to tell jokes or talks about the fact that there were jokes told in the camps and some of the boxer interactions. How did you balance, as you said, the idea of a fun set and this very serious subject matter?
Well, when we were at Auschwitz and we were taken around by one of the people who, works there, knows so much, mentioned, that in the midst of that, there would be those who would end up telling jokes or whatever, as some kind of a relief for a moment here and there. So look, it's part of the human being, is that sometimes you're trying to do something. I think there's a moment or two in the movie. The only reason I question it, because it's 2.5 years since we did the movie. And then, of course, with the pandemic, we couldn't show it for 2 years. So it's a new experience. But there's a reference to that, a joke, etc., just to be able to laugh for a moment, just to break away from all the horrors that they're facing. That's part of the human condition as well.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, the film was made a while ago and then got to premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival. And now it's finding its home on HBO and HBO Max, which I'm sure is not always what you set out to do, making a film plan for theatrical release. But how do you feel about the fact that it will be coming out on this platform?
Well, I mean, it will, it'll be seen. And in the end of the day, you got to be grateful that, in fact, that now be able to be exposed to a wide audience, and they do a great job of. I mean, I've done 3 films with them over the years, 2 with Pacino and 1 with De Niro, and so they're very, very good at handling difficult material, and not just pure, straight down the middle mainstream work, and are able to have. Develop the audience for those films, and did a great job. So here we are. You'd always like to see something on a big screen, but the fact that you can get it to the audience and get that exposure. So I'm very appreciative of that.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled we're at HBO. This is, I guess, the 3rd project on this platform. We did Laramie Project, 6 Feet Under. They take great care of their filmmakers and have a standard, and I'm thrilled to share the Survivor through them. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's very fortuitous that the film will premiere on HBO on Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day. Thank you both for taking the time to speak with me today. For more great content, you can subscribe to the Cinema Daily US YouTube channel. It was very nice to be able to speak with both of you.
Likewise, thank you much.
See ya.